Most people spend their lives chasing attention, chasing validation, chasing people, chasing opportunities. They believe that the more they push, the more they will get, so they talk more, try harder, and constantly put themselves in positions just to be noticed. But the truth is, the more you chase, the more you lower your value, because chasing shows need, and need removes power. But the Sigma male moves differently. He doesn't chase, not because he can't, but because he understands something deeper. Real value doesn't chase, it attracts. Instead of running after people or attention, he focuses on building himself, his mindset, his discipline, his presence. And over time, that creates something most people don't have: natural attraction. He doesn't try to impress, and he doesn't force anything. He moves with purpose, not desperation. While others are trying to be seen, he's focused on becoming better. And that difference may not be obvious at first, but eventually, it becomes impossible to ignore. Because when you stop chasing, you start filtering. You stop giving your energy to everyone, and you become selective. You choose who deserves your time, who deserves your attention, and where you invest your energy. And that selectiveness creates respect. People notice it. They feel that you're not easy to access, that you're not trying to be liked, and that you're not reacting like everyone else. And that creates curiosity. They start paying attention to you, not because you asked for it, but because your presence stands out. That's how attraction works. It's not about chasing, it's about who you are. It's about your standards, your mindset, and your self-respect. And when those things are strong, people feel it without you saying a word. If this mindset speaks to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more content on psychology, mindset, and self-development that most people never pay attention to. Because once you stop chasing and start becoming, everything changes. And now ask yourself this: are you still chasing what you want, or are you becoming the kind of person it naturally comes to? He focuses on self-improvement instead of people. Most people spend a huge part of their lives focused on others. What they think, how they react, how they feel about them. They adjust their behavior to be liked, they seek attention to feel important, and they constantly look outside of themselves for validation. And without realizing it, they lose time, energy, and direction, because their focus is not on growth, it's on perception. But the Sigma male moves differently. He shifts that focus inward. Instead of asking, "How do people see me?" he asks, "How can I improve myself?" And that simple shift changes everything. His time is no longer spent trying to impress others, it's invested in building himself. He works on his mindset, his discipline, and his skills. Not for attention, not for approval, but because he understands that real value comes from who you become, not what you show. And that process happens quietly. No announcements, no need to prove anything, just consistent effort. While others are chasing conversations, he's building habits. While others are trying to be noticed, he's improving in areas that actually matter. And over time, that creates a gap between those who talk about growth and those who actually live it. There's also clarity in this mindset. When your focus is on self-improvement, you stop getting distracted by things that don't matter. You don't waste time trying to impress people who don't add value to your life. You don't get pulled into unnecessary drama or comparison. You stay focused on your path. And that focus creates progress. Because growth is not something that happens in one moment. It's something that builds over time. Small improvements, repeated consistently, turning into real results. And those results become visible, even if you never talk about them. That's where attraction begins. People start noticing the difference. Not because you asked for attention, but because your presence changes. You become more confident, more focused, and more grounded. And that naturally draws people in. There's also a deeper level to this. When you focus on yourself, you stop depending on others. You don't need constant validation. You don't need approval to feel confident. And you don't need to be surrounded by people to feel complete. Your stability comes from within. And that independence is powerful. Because when you don't need anything from others, your interactions become different. You're not chasing, you're choosing. You're not trying to impress, you're being real. And that authenticity creates a different kind of attraction. The Sigma male understands that attention gained by chasing is temporary, but respect gained through self-improvement is lasting. So instead of running after people, he builds himself into someone people naturally notice. He doesn't rush the process. He doesn't look for shortcuts. He trusts that consistent growth will eventually show. And when it does, it will speak louder than anything he could have said. That's why he doesn't chase, because he knows that the more he improves, the less he needs to seek attention, and the more he becomes, the more things start coming to him naturally. The Sigma mindset is not about ignoring people, it's about prioritizing yourself, building a version of yourself that doesn't need to chase, because it already has value. And once you reach that level, everything changes. You don't run after attention anymore. Attention starts running toward you. He doesn't seek validation. Most people live their lives depending on approval without even realizing it. They think before they speak, they hesitate before they act, and they constantly adjust themselves based on how others might react. A compliment can boost their confidence, and a negative opinion can break it. And over time, their sense of self becomes unstable, because it's built on reactions, not on who they truly are. But the Sigma male breaks out of that cycle. He doesn't depend on validation to feel valuable. His confidence doesn't come from likes, attention, or approval. It comes from knowing himself, from understanding his strengths, accepting his weaknesses, and building his identity from within, instead of borrowing it from others. He doesn't try to impress everyone. He doesn't change his personality to fit into every room. He stays consistent, whether people agree with him or not. And that consistency creates strength. Because when your identity is not influenced by others, it becomes stable. There's also freedom in this mindset. When you stop seeking validation, you stop overthinking everything. You stop filtering every word just to avoid judgment. You stop chasing reactions that don't matter. And instead, you start living in alignment with yourself. Your decisions become clearer, your actions more intentional, and your path more focused. People notice this difference. They see that you're not easily influenced, that you don't change depending on the environment, and that you're grounded in who you are. And even if they don't always agree with you, they respect it. Because deep down, everyone admires someone who doesn't need approval. The Sigma male doesn't reject people, he simply refuses to depend on them to define his worth. He can listen, he can learn, but he doesn't lose himself in the process. He doesn't give others the power to decide how he feels about himself. And that's where attraction begins. Because when someone doesn't need validation, they become harder to influence, harder to control, and more confident in a way that feels real. They don't move with desperation, they move with certainty. The Sigma mindset is not about ignoring opinions, it's about not being controlled by them. And once you reach that level, your confidence becomes something stable, something internal, something that doesn't change depending on who's watching. And that's what makes it powerful. Because when you stop seeking validation, you start becoming someone people naturally respect. He is selective with his attention. Most people give their attention too easily. They reply instantly, engage with everyone, and spread their energy across conversations and situations that don't really matter. And without realizing it, they make themselves common. Because when your attention is available to everyone, it loses its value. But the Sigma male understands something different. Attention is a resource. Time, focus, and energy are limited, and where you place them determines the direction of your life. So he becomes selective. He doesn't respond to everything, he doesn't engage with everyone, and he doesn't give access to just anyone. He chooses. He chooses who deserves his time. He chooses which conversations are worth having. He chooses what deserves his focus and what doesn't. And that level of control changes everything. Because instead of reacting to everything around him, he decides where his energy goes. There's also power in that selectiveness. When you don't give your attention easily, it becomes valuable. People notice that you're not always available, that you're not trying to be everywhere, and that you don't respond to everything. And that creates curiosity. Why is he so selective? Why doesn't he react like everyone else? Why does his attention feel limited? And that limitation creates attraction. Because people value what is not easily accessible. When something is rare, it becomes more important. And the same applies to attention. The less you give it away, the more it is valued. The Sigma male doesn't ignore people out of arrogance. He simply understands that not everything deserves his energy. He invests his attention where it matters, where it adds value, and where it aligns with his direction. There's also clarity in this mindset. When you're selective, you avoid distractions. You don't get pulled into unnecessary drama. You don't waste time on meaningless conversations, and you don't lose focus on your goals. Your energy stays directed, and that creates progress, because focus leads to results. While others are scattered, you are aligned. While others are distracted, you are moving forward. And over time, that difference becomes visible. People start noticing your presence. Not because you're louder, but because you're more intentional. You're not reacting to everything, you're choosing what matters. The Sigma mindset is not about isolating yourself, it's about managing your energy, understanding that your attention is valuable and not giving it away freely. And once you start moving like that, everything changes. You don't just become more focused, you become more respected. Because in a world where attention is cheap, the one who controls it becomes powerful. He is comfortable being alone. Most people struggle with being alone because they associate it with loneliness. The moment things get quiet, they feel the need to fill that silence with distractions, conversations, or constant connection. They rely on people to feel complete, and without that presence, they start to feel lost. So they stay in situations longer than they should. They hold on to connections that don't serve them, and they chase company just to avoid facing themselves. But the Sigma male sees solitude differently. For him, being alone is not emptiness, it's clarity. It's a space where there is no pressure, no noise, and no expectations. A place where he can think clearly, understand himself, and focus without distraction. And because of that, he doesn't depend on people to feel whole. He chooses people, he doesn't need them. That difference is powerful, because when you don't need anyone to complete you, you become independent. You're not staying out of fear, you're staying out of choice. And if something doesn't align, you can walk away without hesitation, because your stability doesn't come from others. There's also growth in solitude. While others are constantly distracted, the Sigma uses that time to reflect, to improve, and to understand himself on a deeper level. He notices his patterns, his strengths, and his weaknesses, and instead of ignoring them, he works on them. And that awareness leads to growth. Over time, that growth becomes visible. He becomes more focused, more calm, and more intentional in how he moves. He doesn't get pulled into unnecessary situations, and he doesn't chase things that don't matter, and that creates a presence that feels different. People notice that he's not desperate for attention, that he's not trying to be everywhere, and that he's comfortable in his own space. And that creates attraction. Because someone who is complete on his own doesn't move with need. There's also control in this mindset. When you're comfortable being alone, people can't manipulate you through emotional attachment. They can't pressure you with approval, and they can't trap you in situations you don't want to be in. You move freely because you're not afraid to lose anything. The Sigma male doesn't isolate himself from the world. He simply refuses to depend on it. He connects when it makes sense. He engages when it aligns, but he always remains grounded in himself. And once you reach that level, everything changes. You don't chase connection anymore. You attract it, because people are drawn to those who are already complete. And that's what makes the difference. He moves with purpose, not desperation. Most people move because they feel pressure. Pressure to keep up, pressure to be seen, pressure to prove something. So they rush into decisions, chase opportunities without thinking, and act out of urgency instead of clarity. And because of that, their actions become inconsistent. They start things they don't finish, they follow trends they don't believe in, and they lose direction without even noticing. But the Sigma male moves differently. He doesn't rush, and he doesn't act just because everyone else is moving. Every step he takes has a reason. Every decision is intentional. He understands where he's going, and he aligns his actions with that direction. He moves with purpose. That means he doesn't chase randomly. He doesn't jump into situations just to feel progress. He takes his time to understand what matters, and then he commits to it. And that creates focus. While others are scattered, he is aligned. There's also confidence in this mindset. When you move with purpose, you don't feel the need to prove yourself to everyone. You're not acting for attention. You're acting because it makes sense for you. And that removes desperation from your actions. Because desperation is visible. People can feel when someone is trying too hard, when someone needs something too much, and when someone is acting out of pressure instead of clarity. But when someone is calm, focused, and intentional, it creates a different kind of presence. It feels controlled. The Sigma male doesn't try to impress, and he doesn't force anything. He allows things to develop naturally, because he knows that rushing leads to mistakes, while patience leads to better results. There's also discipline behind this. Moving with purpose requires you to say no to distractions. It requires you to stay committed even when it's difficult, and to keep going even when there is no immediate reward. And over time, that consistency builds something strong. Because when your actions are aligned, your progress becomes real. You don't just move, you move forward. And that difference becomes visible. People notice that you're not just busy, you're focused. You're not just doing things, you're building something. And that creates respect. The Sigma mindset is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters. Cutting out what doesn't align and focusing on what does. And once you start moving like that, everything changes. You stop chasing random outcomes, and you start attracting results that align with your direction. Because when your actions have purpose, your presence becomes powerful. He lets results speak instead of words. Most people talk too much about what they're going to do. They announce their plans, share their goals, and explain every step before they even take it. It gives them a temporary sense of progress, like they're already moving forward, but in reality, nothing has happened yet. And over time, that habit becomes a trap, because talking replaces action. But the Sigma male doesn't fall into that pattern. He understands something simple but powerful. Words create attention, but results create respect. So instead of talking about what he's going to do, he focuses on actually doing it. He works quietly, no announcements, no need for people to know, no pressure to impress anyone. While others are speaking, he's building. While others are posting, he's improving. And while others are looking for recognition, he's focused on progress. At first, nobody notices. There's no applause, no validation, no external reward. Just effort, discipline, and consistency. And that's where most people stop, because they need to be seen to stay motivated. But the Sigma male doesn't depend on that. His motivation is internal. It comes from knowing that he's improving, that he's getting closer to his goals, and that his work will eventually show. And that patience creates power, because over time, those quiet efforts start to compound. Skills improve, discipline becomes stronger, and results begin to appear. Not suddenly, but gradually. And when they do, they speak louder than anything he could have said. People start noticing the difference. Not because he told them, but because they can see it. They see the growth, the progress, the results. And that creates a different kind of impact, one that feels real, not forced, because it's based on proof, not words. There's also a level of control in this mindset. When you don't announce everything, you protect your focus. You're not distracted by opinions, you're not influenced by expectations, and you're not pressured to perform for others. You move at your own pace, in your own direction. And that gives you an advantage, because while others are seeking attention, you're building something that lasts. You're not chasing temporary recognition, you're creating long-term value. And that difference becomes visible over time. People respect what is proven. Anyone can talk, anyone can promise, anyone can explain what they're going to do, but very few people can actually deliver. And when you become someone who delivers consistently, without needing to talk about it, you stand out. The Sigma male doesn't stay silent because he has nothing to say. He stays silent because he understands that results will speak for him. And when they do, they don't need explanation. They don't need validation. They don't need attention. They create it. That's why he doesn't chase. Because he knows that the more he builds, the more things come to him naturally. The Sigma mindset is not about avoiding attention. It's about earning it without asking for it. It's about becoming someone whose presence is backed by results, not words. And once you reach that level, everything changes. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to prove anything. Your results do it for you. And that's what makes you different. Not louder, not more visible, but more real. And in the end, that's what people respect the most. So now you understand the difference. It's not about chasing people, attention, or validation. It's about who you become when no one is watching. While most people run after what they want, the Sigma builds himself until what he wants starts coming to him. Quietly, naturally, without forcing anything. And that shift alone is what separates those who chase from those who attract. The truth is, most people will hear this and keep doing the same thing. They'll keep chasing approval, attention, and results without ever working on themselves. But a small percentage will take this seriously. They'll focus on growth, discipline, and self-respect. And over time, they'll notice something change. They're no longer chasing. Things start coming to them. If this made you think differently, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more content on psychology, mindset, and self-development that most people ignore. Because once you understand this level of thinking, you don't go back. And now I want to hear from you. Be honest. Are you still chasing what you want? Or are you becoming the kind of person it naturally comes to? Drop your answer in the comments. I read everything, and I reply to as many of you as I can.